Hello, hello, hello. Happy Thursday. It has been an incredibly busy week over here on Indie Game Clinic. I've had to do a lot more streams because we've had the Game Jam, which the results are in for now. Go and check it out. itch.io, Collab Jam 26. Top 3 games were... well, you just have to go and have a look. I'm going to do a follow-up video on that. I won't go into it in detail today because we're here to do something else, which is play 2 games that are kind of loosely about strategy, tactics, battles type things. I've got 2 games from our patrons today that have been in the queue for a little while. So there are 2 queues. If you look at the bottom of the screen, if you're not a patron, there's a form on indiegameclinic.com where you can submit games to have them sort of play tested live. And that form is very long. The queue is very long. I get through it as quickly as I can. I try and prioritize developers that have something interesting to show or who send a nice personal message. That's one of the things that I've noticed. I'm kind of picking out games to play based on a lot of the time because it kind of shows that someone genuinely like watches the channel and cares about the feedback rather than just like spamming as many creators as possible. So I tend to look at things like that when it comes to picking from this queue, which is about 200 games long, and then there's this queue which is about 10 games long, which is folks from the Patreon, so patrons of the channel members who submit their games over on the Discord, the private Discord. And today I've got 2 games from that list. We've got Race to Ruler and Banners. Banners we've seen before on a stream. I'm looking at it because it had a bug last time which blocked us from playing it. And previously when I did these supporter streams, there were loads of games mushed together into one stream. I'm trying to slow down on that a little bit more, give people a little bit more time. So we've got 2 patrons games today, and then I'm going to be kind of mixing them together a little bit from next week. So if you're new to the channel, don't worry about too much of that stuff. The main thing is some of the games you'll see are from folks that support the channel, so they get priority. And some of the games you see are from the big old backlog of games which have been sent in for feedback. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at today. So I haven't checked out Race to Ruler yet. It looks like it's got some sort of Hearthstone DNA. It's telling me to install the demo there, but I've already got it ready. Oh, that's not good. Let's go back and see what's going on there. Let's try and reinstall it. Uh-oh. See, I checked beforehand if I had it installed, but I didn't check if it ran. So we'll probably... give me a second. I'll see if we've got something else waiting that's similar. Okay, we'll do Souls on the Line because that's a similar sort of thing. Just double check. I don't want to pass this game over, but I mean, you can resubmit it anyway. There's no problem there. I did tell the developer of Banners I would play that a bit later because he wanted to join in and he's at work. Yeah, the game executable, whichever link I take to try and get Race to Ruler to work, is not taking us there, which is a shame. So let's just do a first impressions on the Steam page then, if we can't do that. A deck building roguelike where your cards are your army as you embark on a journey to defeat the ruler of an empire. Draft and train new units, summon epic beings, defeat your rivals, and claim the crown. Okay, cool. All of this kind of looks coherent. The art style for the game and the capsule are all sort of pointing in the same direction and stuff, which is good. Let's have a look. What's that kind of, is it Frostborn? Was the sort of smaller but very polished card game, Hearthstone-y deck builder thing. It's kind of looking at, it's in the same sort of space as that. This is very kind of bold, bright artwork that feels a little bit mobile-y, but it just makes it look welcoming, I guess. This wouldn't necessarily put me off per se. But yeah, I think I would have to really play this to see what it's doing differently from similar games. It looks like we're fighting against that and we're placing stuff in the middle. Let's have a look. What's that icon? Are we paying for things with beer? Can't tell what it means. I mean, the things I'm seeing here that bode well for this game, and I'm sure I will get to playtest it at some point in the future. It's not going to happen on this stream because the installer's not working. The thing that bode well for me here is like when I play a card-driven dueling game, I don't want every single card to have loads of really complex text, and these look like they're kind of, you know, reasonably balanced in terms of that. Because there's nothing worse than playing a new card game and like every card in your hand is like some super overly complicated instruction that you need to internalize. So it doesn't look like it does that. The thing that I think is interesting is some of these, I mean, they're all units, right? So we don't have the concept of like spells or different kinds of cards that you have in something like Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering. So I'd have to see how that plays out in terms of like the depth of strategy once you're playing stuff onto the field if you don't have spells or anything like that. But we will play that at a later date. I am going to slot a different game in, which I think let's do. Let's look at Souls on the Line because that's on itch. I'm just going to quickly ping the dev in case they're around. We'll do Souls on the Line first. Okay. Just need to ping the dev on our Discord so that they get a chance to come in. They may be they may be asleep wherever they are or working or whatever, but I would still like to ping them just so they can get a chance to pop in if they want to. So sorry for the delayed start there, folks. But I want to make sure we get 2 games in and also that the devs get the opportunity to join if they're around. So we'll start with this one. We're using cards to summon magical companions to do battle using position and sequence-based tactics, right? Position decides role. Behind you is offense, in front of you is defense. Okay, cool. That's a way to make one of these games interesting. Darkest Dungeon has loads of positionality. Like, there are moves you can only do in certain positions and moves which are more or less effective in different positions, and you're like constantly trying to break the enemy's formation as well. And then you've got things like Rogue Book or that one I was playing recently, Tales of Northlander, I think it was, where it's all about like you've got characters in 3 slots. They can't move around, but they perform different roles depending on where they're in. So I generally have had good experiences with that kind of mechanic because it shows that the developer is thinking about like how do you create interesting decisions rather than just copying Pokemon. Just gonna, I can't full screen this, so I'm just gonna do that, I think. Is that gonna work? Cole. Cole creates spectral clones of himself. Once an instructor at Beckford Academy, he now flees with a powerful artifact. Okay. We've got That's a big old node map. Battle, 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 camp. Okay, so I'm going to go this way because this has a town and a camp. I don't know what a town is, but these symbols are reasonably clear, which is good. Sometimes I see those node maps and it's just like, why have you done one of these? I can't tell what any of the symbols are. There should be like things that are reasonably intuitive the first time you play the game, you know? Okay. Your allies behind you have +2 damage until the enemy phase. Okay, I'm not a massive fan of this music choice already, but I'll get into why later. That's a spectral clone. So we're summoning stuff. This is our main character. This is a character we've summoned. The idea of the spectral clone is a good way of like testing mechanics without having to make extra art. I kind of like that. I wouldn't necessarily have it as the first character, maybe, in a full game. I would have it for a later on character so it doesn't feel cheap. But it is a good idea. Your allies behind you... Okay. Are they just... They're just going to, like, auto-battle. So... Okay. Interesting. So it's kind of giving me expectations of Slay the Spire and certain other games because of the way that the cards and the UI are laid out. But we don't seem to be playing stuff directly into this to kind of create damage. I think something else is going to happen when we end the turn. A cursed leaflet and a cursed ledger. And then they do auto attacks. Okay. And ally attacks. Okay. Oh, okay. We can trigger them to attack with our spells here. Release a summoned ally. Your next soul enters with 2 attack damage. Okay, so we're going to get rid of that guy because he's got low health. It's not, for me, it's not so much that the music is corporate. I just think it's inappropriate for a game where you're reading and strategizing. It's just too... I mean, it is kind of like corporate anime cyberpunk type thing, like thematically. But just, I don't want like hard-hitting drums when I'm reading and thinking through moves in a game like this, generally. Okay, now when we summon a new clone, that previous one is going to give this one extra attack. Now, how do I see their attack? Oh, there. Oh, it's up there. Okay. That's what he's going to do. So I sacrificed one of my allies that had the least health to boost the next one I summoned, and now this guy's going to do more damage. And then I do that, but he doesn't have any allies behind him, so that's no good. Trigger him to attack, and then I don't have any energy left. I know it's a kind of classic JRPG thing of like trying to trick the player into thinking they're doing something really action-oriented by putting really heavy music over a turn-based game, but I think generally speaking it's not a good idea, and that's why a lot of modern turn-based tactical games don't do it. You know, even if you kind of... Darkest Dungeon has very heavy music, but it doesn't have those very kind of front of mix hard drums. It's like rattling away in the background going boom, 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 boom. And that's different because it's just there to kind of create a mood. Keep attacking with this guy because he's got the most attack. And make another clone. I don't think we can make any more. So I don't know if this works yet, but I like what you're doing in terms of just taking... You're taking like a UX that people understand. You know, our guys are over here, their guys are over there. They've got health, they've got what they're going to do above their head. So we're taking the Slay the Spire thing of like showing a character's intentions, but instead of that just being the enemy, it's like we've got these things we summon like Pokemon. They're going to do their own thing, and then we can like buff them and direct them with our cards. So you've got a lot of the same UX as a Slay the Spire or something similar in terms of how you interact with it, but there are a few rule changes that feel like they could be interesting. I'm not sure if they are yet, but they've got like the ingredients for an interesting game. And I said this before with Northlander Chronicles, and I'll just quickly show it again. Northlander Chronicles was a game when I first looked at it, it looked a little bit over polished, looked a little bit kind of mid-core mobile game-y. And when I played this, I absolutely loved it. And one of the reasons was, you know, so much of the game here is stuff you will recognize from other games. And that's not a bad thing, because the the little bits that they've chosen to change in how the system works make it feel very different in terms of how you're thinking about it. So Northlander Chronicles has this alternative like mana system where each character has their own color of mana, and then you've got this one spare neutral mana that anyone can use each turn. And also, if you don't draw cards for that character, their mana sort of saves up over turns, and that creates loads of interesting little crunchy decisions moment to moment. And it's not the most exciting place to make a change in this kind of system. If someone was presenting this to you and you were going, well, how's it different from Slay the Spire? I'm going to keep playing Slay the Spire 2. And you said, well, it's got a different mana system. That wouldn't necessarily shine as a feature for marketing to make people go, oh, wow, a different mana system, right? But when you start playing with it and you feel the kind of the crunch that you get out of that as a kind of making strategic or tactical decisions type thing, it really starts to sing. And the reason I like what I see so far in Souls on the Line is that that's a good pun as well, because they're standing on a line. The thing I like about what I see so far is you've put some big changes into small areas, and now we can see what actually comes out of that. So I kind of like, we've kind of got a little bit more of an auto battler here, where we're just kind of summoning things and trying to boost them, and then they attack on their own. But everything in terms of how I interact with it by clicking and dragging around the screen is incredibly familiar from similar games, even though the actual game mechanics aren't the same. And that's a good approach, I think. Oh, I can summon them behind me. Okay, interesting. I need to start doing that. Okay, the next guy is going to be summoned with extra attack. So we're going to put it behind me. And the one in front of me is going to be there as a human shield. And then we'll do Resonance Wake. And now this guy has 5 attack. And he's got a Blasting Rod Fireball because I put him behind me, right? So characters I spawn in front of me do their defensive move, which is basically they're there to take hits and then they do a low damage attack. And if I spawn them behind me, they do their kind of more kind of glass cannon-y type thing of... okay, they're... do an extra attack with them. Yeah, I'm not going to go in. I'm not going to do an in-depth response to that game engine question. But one thing I will say is, most people who do game dev for any considerable amount of time probably don't stick with the same engine the entire time. So you may as well just start using one, and if you don't get on with it, switch. Unreal would be at the bottom of my list of recommendations. I think Unreal is a very good engine for people that are competent 3D artists. And I agree with what Robin is saying as well. It looks very flashy and it can make very realistic looking things, but what tends to happen is you get technical people who aren't artists using Unreal. They slap in all this kind of loads of lighting, loads of shadows, and the models and everything they use don't match up with the level of realism of everything else, and it just ends up looking tacky. So that would be the bottom of my list of recommendations. So pick any of the others and start learning, and maybe try another one after you've done a game jam or two, and then work out which engine you like the most out of the ones you've tried. But you know, learning to make anything to any decent standard of quality is a long road, and you will use different tools. It's just like musical instruments. I know very few people who've been playing music for like more than 10 years who only play one instrument. Because when you're first learning something, the kind of using the technical tool seems to be what it's all about. And then when you actually start making things for other people, you get a bit more, you know, you want to try more things out and everything. Okay, we'll do the full list. Okay, I would always recommend Unreal the last, unless you come from a background of making 3D art and you're like a 3D artist and you want to learn a game engine. Use Unreal because that's kind of what it's made for, and it's also like a sort of cinematic engine for making movie art and stuff. I think people generally make bad games in it unless they can do the art themselves and they're very like 3D art driven. I generally think people should learn 2D game dev before they learn 3D game dev because the math is easier and the art pipeline is easier. It's a lot quicker to just make your own character as a sprite and get them moving around and walking if you're working in 2D than it is with 3D. And I think there is a benefit to, you know, trying to make games where you make everything, even if it looks kind of crappy. I don't have strong opinions on Unity because I haven't used it much. I have a general like of Godot because most of our community make it and most of our community use it and people seem to be having a good time with it. And then I personally use GameMaker because I've used it the longest, and that's kind of, you know, that determines how quick you can use something and what you can do in it. She's in with the click and play. That keeps coming up in our book club books. Okay, we're going to get rid of one of those to boost the next guy we summon. This round, your allies behind you have on attack. The frontmost ally gains 1 vitality. Okay, that's interesting. So we can... There's a lot of interesting card interactions here. So then I could have had these guys attack to give the guy at the front more health. But I would have needed to save enough energy to make them attack because... that guy just kind of got killed before they got a chance to trigger it that time. The game is coming along okay. It's just slow. Because I think the way to think about it, right, is... or the way to understand my situation, really, is... I've been working in games for like 10 years. Some of that has been teaching. Most of it has been working in studios. And... I do make my own games as a hobby, but I wouldn't necessarily consider myself an indie game developer. Because making games as a hobby is not really what indie game development is. And so a lot of channels, like if you watch like Thomas Stewart's channel or Jonas Tyroller's channel or Aramis's channel, those are channels where those people are predominantly indie game developers, and then they have a channel that is kind of like a, you know, like a marketing avenue for their games and for their kind of brand as a studio or whatever. And that's a very different situation to this channel, because this channel is primarily a games analysis channel. And then when I do get a chance to work on a game, I stream it and stuff because I know people find it interesting. But yeah, the the place we're in at the moment is Gleb, who is helping me out with the programming, is working on a few different projects. I'm working on a few different projects. So we both have weeks where we work for where we put a lot of time into Golem Gourmet and then go away and do other stuff. So for Gleb, it's doing freelance on other games. And for me, it's like doing videos for the channel, doing freelance on other games as well is another thing that I do. So I would say out of every month that goes by, there's probably only a week of that that's spent working even kind of part-time on the game. So it's slow, but we have also like recently rescoped the game quite a lot to make it more manageable. And I think that means we probably will be able to finish it in the next sort of 9 to 12 months. What do you think of the whole Chris C genre trend thing, or are you against that idea of trend hopping as an indie? I think generally people should make the types of games they understand best, right? I think Chris tends to give... I think a lot of people on YouTube tend to give advice, which is the best advice for the largest group of people. And it doesn't take into account context of the developer, right? Because as soon as you start complicating anything you want to tell people on YouTube and saying, well, if you're here, do this, and if you're here, do this, and if you're here, do this, people switch off. So it tends to be better for YouTube to just say, everyone should do this. Now, my experience as someone who has played indie games a lot and plays a lot of indie games, and has done a lot of teaching as well, is that I don't think you do well in this kind of market, if you want to call it that, or scene, if you are making things that you don't genuinely like. I think you have to have a real kind of passion for what you're making. And that doesn't... I don't think you should interpret that as like, well, if you only like Diablo and Final Fantasy, then you should make something like that. Because that's still a bad idea, because those games are too big for you to make on your own if you're a solo developer, right? So there's like one type of thing that people tell you, which is like, oh, look at the statistics. This thing does well and it's easy to make, so therefore you should make that, right? And then there's like another extreme, which is just make whatever you want. Follow your passion. And I think the sensible thing is usually in the middle somewhere, right? So Visionary watches, if you're new to the channel, watch my video that is called, I think it's called Indie Game Genres and Subtractive Design, right? Because it talks about how there are all these different genres of games in indie games, and they are all driven by the need to keep the project scope small. And that's why we have like, you know, games that tell a story that don't have characters walking around talking in them. And like first-person shooters that are in an arena, so we don't have to do loads of level design. There are all of these like little subgenres within indie games that cater to, from a development point of view, cater to different types of developers. So if you're a developer that is much more art-focused, there are types of games you can make. If you're a developer that is much more systems and UI-focused, there are types of games you can make. I don't think it's ever a good idea to take a type of game that you don't personally enjoy or understand and try to make it because you think you'll be commercially successful. Because the fans of that genre will see through that. It's different if you commit to actually researching the genre properly, right? So when I used to work in mobile games, in the bad old days, if we were making a type of game that we hadn't made before, it would be part of my job as a designer and producer to like download 10 similar games and go through them and like work out how they worked. What do people like about them? Those kind of things. So you can make a type of game that you don't have like a personal history of playing, but you need to commit to actually researching it rather than just surface level, you know, I spend 5 minutes looking at Vampire Survivors and now I think I understand how that game works and what people enjoy about it. That's not good enough, right? So if you were kind of going down that route of like, oh, so-and-so tells me to make an incremental, or Chris Zukowski tells me to make a horror game or whatever, part of making the game is doing the research properly and like going and playing what's out there and seeing, okay, what could I do about this that would make it better? What could I do about this that solves some problem that these other games have? That is part of your job as a game designer. So I think the shortcut is to find the types of indie games that you actually like and feel like you could technically execute, right? Because there's types of games that I like that I just look at them and I think, well, I couldn't make that because it requires too much of this specific type of programming or this type of art or this type of writing or whatever. So I just don't do them. And the vast majority of sort of failed indie games that don't even get to the point where they've got wish lists or playtesters come from people taking on projects that they just don't have the skills to do. Like a classic example of this is like the person that aspires to make an RPG on their own and they don't enjoy writing, and it's like, why have you made that genre of game? Like I played one that someone had been making for 5 years, and I was walking around the town talking to the NPCs and they still had placeholder text after the dev had been working on it for 5 years. And I thought, well, you clearly don't like doing this thing, so why are you making this sort of game, you know? So I think the top level here is you can give everyone the same advice. I don't like to think of what I do on this channel as advice, right? I'm giving you my perspectives as a professional. I don't know who you are. Advice is contextual, it's personal, it's interpersonal. And that's why like learning things from videos and streams is not great, because you need to have an actual interaction with someone back and forth that isn't parasocial. But YouTube prioritizes people just coming and giving you clear instruction of like, this is what you have to do, which is fine for like technical things of like, here's how you hold a pen, here's how you do this particular programming thing. But stuff like, you know, what should you specifically do in terms of what you should make or how you should operate as a business or whatever is incredibly contextual to you. So like the kind of catch-all advice is there for the people who are not quite at the stage to really understand their own skill set and work out what they would be best suited to do, because successful indie games are usually a product of someone who is very self-aware about what they're good at and what they're not good at, and they make a project that capitalizes on the things that they're good at and minimalizes the things that they're not good at. Paul, yours was the medical theme game in the jam. I'm surprised. Did it not do as well as you thought? Because that was probably one of my favorites actually. That's one that I will remember from that jam. And like I said on the stream, it's very easy to make a game with that sort of theme and to make it feel a little bit like it's tugging on the heartstrings in a sort of manipulative way to try and make people think the game is better than it is. And I thought that was actually a really good game. So I'm no-braining the game a little bit here because people are asking good questions, so... So Cheese said you can always go buy some games for whatever the hot market thing is and ensure you like them before you try to start making them. Yeah. I think, you know, it's kind of like when people ask me what my favorite game genres are. So if you've just tuned in and you don't understand the game, I'm summoning clones of myself, which makes this a little bit visually confusing. I think, Dev, if you get a chance to watch this, one thing I would do with this very soon is make sure that the spectral clones are like blue hologram type things, so that it's just very clear when you're watching this which one are the clones and stuff, because I understand, but I don't think a spectator would. This guy is like summoning shields in front of him and stuff, which is annoying. What was Cheese saying? Yeah, basically buy some games in the genre that you intend to enter into. But one things I noticed with you, Cheese, is like your jam game was kind of like an incremental game, and I know you've said before that you don't necessarily want to make incremental games, but that was a really good exercise in like, if you made one, what would your version of a good incremental game be? Which I think can be a really helpful way of approaching design. So one of the things that people ask me sometimes is like, what genres of game do you like? And I tend to find, well, actually, I like most games. It's just there are games in each genre that I think are good examples, right? Like I 95% 5% of horror games I don't like. And then there are horror games that I think are fantastic, just like anything else, right? And I think it can be a really helpful way to approach game design is to like play a bunch of games in a genre that you think you don't like, work out if there are any that you do like, and then try and work out what qualities are there that make those ones special. What is it that they do different? Because that's how you develop your taste as a designer. And design is about taste. I think there are types of people that want to turn it into a science, and they're like trying to do it through statistics and stuff, which you can only do when you've got like a big enough data pool to, you know, once you've launched a game and you've got data tracking in it, then you can start doing data-driven design. But you shouldn't use data-driven design to decide what you make in the first place by like going, oh, this genre does well, so let's do one of those. I don't think that's generally a good idea. But yeah, you play other games, work out what you like and don't like, and that's how you develop your own design sense. And there's more to it than that, obviously. There are like, you might have ideas for putting something into a type of game that just doesn't work because it undermines something else that's supposed to be enjoyable about that type of game. But you learn that as you go as well. And I think as long as you understand that game development is iterative and you're not supposed to get it right first time anyway, right? You need to be willing to throw stuff out. You need to be willing to change stuff as you work on it. That's just a normal part of doing any kind of creativity. But with something like games, it's even more important because there's all these moving parts and you don't know how it's going to work and how it's going to make people feel until they're actually doing it. So you've got to be willing to like throw out the baby, the bathwater, the bath, all of that kind of stuff. You cannot make a game for everyone, yeah. Bob says, hey Joe, are you specifically targeting the Steam indie game scene? You seem to offer advice specifically for Steam a lot. I think most people, when they're starting making games, they should be thinking about itch first, because itch is like the hobby platform. I talk about Steam a lot because I'm trying to catch the people who are sort of just shovel-wearing their hobby projects onto Steam and go, look, this doesn't belong here yet. This is not a commercial indie game yet. Maybe if you do these things, it will be commercial indie game level. But lots of stuff that people put on Steam doesn't really feel like it's at that level yet. The other thing for me is like, what do we mean when we define indie, which is like a cultural question. I'm going to like leave Souls on the line for a moment and get the next game up in a minute. I like this. I'm happy to talk to the dev about this on Discord. I kind of need to play it with a different character and different summons to see what it's really like, but I think the core mechanics of this are quite solid. And I like the fact that all of the UX and VFX and everything is already kind of in place to make that. You can keep iterating on that and making it more beautiful and making it feel good, but this is already very good at kind of communicating what's happening in the game, which is great. But yeah, just to answer, whose question was it? Bob in the chat. So for me, indie games don't really include most of what goes out on mobile. And there's like a lot of reasons for that. But, you know, you've got making games as a hobby and a craft. And the vast majority of game making that happens across the world when people sit down for their first couple of years of playing around with a game engine, I would say is hobby craft rather than, you know, serious game development and publishing. And that's not an insult. It's just a kind of professional judgment of like what it means to be a professional versus an amateur, right? Whereas an indie game is a like commercially released game that isn't just like vanity published hobby project, right? Now that's already a different definition from what lots of people use, because lots of people are just like, well, I don't have a publisher, you know, I'm not making games for anyone else, so everything I do is indie game dev, right? That's not really how I see that. You've also got what are indie games from the perception of people who play them, right? Which is I think when you're thinking about definitions, you can obviously have your kind of elitist, this is what specialists say, so this is the real thing. But you've also got your pragmatic, like this is how most people use this term. And the way that indie game developers, or like game developers or hobbyist game developers, people that watch this channel, people who watch similar channels, use the term indie game dev is different from how people who play indie games use the term indie games. Right? So if you go and you look at a website like Rock Paper Shotgun and you look at all the indie games on there, they're not showing like the hobby tier of games that comes out and maybe get a few like 100 little sales from like sickos in a particular area. Occasionally they will, but that's kind of, you know, what most people think of indie games as are like reasonably polished, kind of up there, not like hobby projects where you're just sort of donating to the developer a few dollars each time. So there's that aspect as well. And that also means that indie kind of rules out independently produced games which are like mobile free to play games with like ads and, you know, premium currencies in and stuff like that. And that doesn't mean that those games aren't independently developed and that those developers aren't independent game devs. But most people, if they find like a small match 3 mobile game, like hyper casual mobile game, even if it's independently developed, they wouldn't think of it as an indie game because it doesn't have like the aesthetics of an indie game. It doesn't have that kind of, it feels like it's trying to pretend to be made by a bigger company, that kind of thing. So there's all of these kind of things in play, and the channel was deliberately branded as Indie Game Clinic because it's like, we're going to try and make your indie games better, right? So I deliberately don't focus on games that feel like casual mobile games, because the portion of the audience for this channel who are actually here because they like indie games rather than game development want to see up and coming indie games. They don't want to see like someone's Candy Crush clone or someone's attempt at remaking Duolingo or something like that. So there's all of these factors, and they sort of tend to push us towards Steam more than anything else. And that's partly because the game dev audience is interested in Steam, but it's also because it's where most indie games start out commercially, right? You go hobby game on itch. If it does well, you might go to Steam from there, and then you might go and do your like mobile ports and your PlayStation and your Switch versions from there, right? But it kind of has to go through Steam in the first place to get to those other consoles most of the time. So there's all of those things that come in, and it's a combination of what's relevant to the audience, what means that we don't spend too much time on things that, you know, an indie game fan wouldn't think of as indie games as well, because, you know, ultimately a lot of people send their games to me because they want a little bit of exposure. And if I'm sitting here playing like a mobile phone learning app for 3-year-olds, which I did do stuff like that very, very early on in the channel, we're only ever going to have an audience of hobby developers, and we're never going to have an audience of people that see your games and then, you know, you get your first wish list from as well. So part of the reason for that is that as well. And that's one of the reasons why the channel is silly and goofy, and why I'm not sitting here in a beautifully lit room talking about all my professional experience all the time, and why I'm making video essays with weird little songs in and jokes, is because I don't want the viewership of this channel just to be entirely help me make my game, help me sell my game type people, because I want some of the viewership of this channel to be people who will actually see your games and go and wishlist them, right? Because the problem with having a YouTube channel to market your games, if you're like doing it for your own games like a lot of game dev YouTubers do, is hardly any of your audience are actually there for games. They're there for like tips on their own games. And trying to like mix those audiences together is very, very difficult, and it's kind of a struggle that I've had for 2 years while running this channel. Sorry, I've been rambling. Let me just look through the see what's come up in the chat since I started. Kana said, I call it the John Smith effect. John Smith's is a completely inoffensive beer that if you like bitter and probably can drink, but it's kind of bland and you're not going to write home about it. I'm here for the Candy Crush clones. Yeah, see, when I say Candy Crush, I'm not necessarily saying that a match 3 game can't be indie, right? You can have an indie game that's a match 3 game. It's not about the mechanics. It's about like the art style, it's about the platform, it's about the monetization thing. Like, I don't do any consulting work on free-to-play monetized games anymore because I worked in that sector for a long time, and it just always perverts the game design away from trying to be fun because you're always trying to create pinch points to get more money out of people. My writer pal friend is... I just want to see if Bob's got any follow-up questions, because I know that was an incredibly dense response to his his question. My writer friend pal is working on a visual novel with the goal of selling it on Steam purely as a bucket list box ticking thing. I've been trying to convince him to at least try to do the promotion side of things, at least giving it a chance to gain some wish list with a demo first. Yeah. So I think my advice to your friend, Robin, you can always send them this with the timestamp. So it's going to be at like 47 minutes 20. So my advice with a visual novel is you need to work out what the player's like main thing they're doing as the character is. And I don't mean like clicking on boxes to choose dialogue options. I mean, what's their kind of role in the situation? And this is why so many visual novels fall into the category of being romances or mysteries, because those things give you a very clear role, right? And you can make a mystery or a detective visual novel without the character being a detective. They could be a journalist, they could be a psychiatrist, but as soon as you make the player character in a visual novel an inquiring profession, then you've set up people to understand the game, because it's like, okay, I'm here to work out what's going on, right? Professor Layton, Phoenix Wright, not a detective, lawyer, right? Inquiring characters. That kind of frames the visual novel as a game, because even if it's just dialogue choices, the player now understands why they're making those dialogue choices. They're playing to find out, right? In a romance game, you're playing to learn about the characters so that you can make a judgment about which of the characters you like the most, or you're trying to like win this social judgment thing of like, how do I impress this particular character? So in writing, you think of like sort of things that characters do as like sweeping gestures, right? So you can say something, you can do a speech act, and it can have particular words attached to it, but what are you doing? Are you admonishing someone? Are you judging them? Are you encouraging them? Those are the things that are the kind of gameplay verbs in visual novels. And if you're just sort of choosing dialogues and you don't really understand what your character is doing in the situation, if you're there to like judge a particular thing or learn about a particular thing or uncover a particular thing, that's usually what makes most bad visual novels bad, is that the story doesn't really position you as a character that's there to find anything out in particular or inquire about anything or make a judgment about something. Judgment is like a really powerful verb in interactive fiction. Like the player is trying to judge stuff, they're trying to avoid the judgment of other characters. Disco Elysium runs entirely off of trying to keep the cop partner on your side and not be judged poorly by them, that kind of thing. So think about those. Hope you find that useful. I need to play Titanium Core. It's probably in my next 5 games I will purchase. What are some game genres or styles you're interested in breaking down but you don't get enough of? That's interesting questions. I'll answer Emil's question first because that's easy to answer. What about mobile ports of Steam indie games? I mean, it's still... I'm not sure what you're asking there, because I wouldn't be talking about like what's different from the port to the main game. So if it's on Steam and I'm sitting here on a computer, I'm gonna look at the Steam version anyway. Sub-Zero, that is a good question. What games do we not get enough of being sent through? That's I'll come back to that in a minute, because I think I can answer that using something else. I have a friend that shovels these shallow clones on Steam. Good technical skills, but no game insight. How can I help him see the issue? I think sometimes if someone else keeps stepping on a rake, the best thing you can do is just use that to help yourself not step on the rake. You know, I think sometimes people are doing things for reasons that you don't understand, and they don't necessarily care that they're not being successful in the way that you would care about. You know, you can't help someone that doesn't want help. But also, they might not want their help because, as far as they're concerned, what they're doing is fine. It is sad to see that kind of wasted opportunity. And you won't just see this in games, right? I'm quite active in my local music scene. And one of the things that really bothers me is I see these great bands and they're out there performing and people are recording them and stuff. And then they don't have any proper presence online. They just sort of slap random music videos or performance videos on YouTube. There's nothing done to make it actually speak to the YouTube audience, and it feels like a wasted opportunity, and I want to help them all. And I just, occasionally I'll reach out and tell someone about something and give them some advice. They usually don't take it, and I just think, well, maybe I need to just give myself the advice instead. Because unless people are like coming to you actively asking, a lot of the time they're not going to be receptive to it. Kuna said, why do you think mobile gaming never really progressed beyond the casual game market? I mean, you do still get, I would say, like Monument Valley is an example of like a polished indie game that is mobile native. Something like 80 Days by Inkle, to me, makes more sense on mobile. You know, Reigns makes more sense on mobile. So there are like... You know, there are these sort of premium mobile games that are indie games. And I think the best ones are ones that make the best use of the interface. You know, they're not like action games with virtual joysticks. Like Reigns is a game that was designed with the mobile phone interface in mind. You can buy it on Steam and you can click and drag things left and right, but it doesn't feel the same, you know? But I mean, it's just to do with how big the market is for the different things. And the reason why casual games took off on mobile is that people have mobiles for other reasons. And that means that people that don't identify as gamers will play games on them. But they wouldn't, there's lots of people that play mobile games that would never buy a dedicated console at home. Thanks, Simtem. Thanks for joining as well. Yeah, so the mobile companies do spend a lot on user acquisition as well, yeah. So just to answer, I'm going to answer Sub-Zero's question about what games would I like to see more of, but I'm going to do it in a weird roundabout way because I want to update you on my little experiment. And this is partly because I think you'll find it interesting, but it's also to keep myself honest as well. So I'm doing an experiment over the next month or so where I am looking at a month's worth of games released on Steam. And I am recording my gut reactions to them. So although this might look like a big data thing, don't get confused and see a spreadsheet and think that this is objective information, because it's not. It's my way of recording my gut instincts about the games. So I'm recording a bunch of different things about basically anything that's not a DLC, anything that's not free, any kind of premium game released on Steam in the entirety of May, I'm recording. So I've got about 200 on this list. There's going to be about 1,000 by the time I've finished. And what I'm trying to do is record how good I think these three main areas are, whether I think the game presents as value for money as well. Because sometimes there's a really good game, but it just seems a little bit overpriced. Sometimes a game seems underpriced. And then I'm weighting all of that into a score that tells me how well I think that game is positioned to do, right? And the whole point of this really is for me to check my own gut instincts. So all of the information you see on there at the moment, all of these color-coded bits are my gut instincts about the game. Obviously, there's some stuff like the price, which is actually objective. And then what I'm going to do is like a month later, I'm going to record how many sales the game's had and kind of compare that data. And I think what I will probably see is there are certain genres where I'm not very good at predicting and certain genres where I am. But the reason that I'm linking this to Sub-Zero's question is I've been sort of like recording the genres and stuff as well. But I've been doing them in terms of how I see the genres, in terms of who I think would play those games, rather than the Steam tags. Because the Steam tags are often wrong. And, something's labeled as a deck builder when it's actually not really about thinking about a deck of stuff or whatever. So I've been labeling things based on that. And I think I can kind of look through this and think about like which things would I like to see more of. I definitely don't want to see more casino games. It is a bit like Review Guesser, right? Because Review Guesser was there to show the people who used it or the people who played it that generally speaking, you can judge a book by its cover. Right? If you are objective and you're looking at, or even if you're subjective, right? You don't even need to be objective. If you're looking at someone else's game, you can usually judge whether or not it's going to do well. And I think what Review Guesser was trying to do, or one of the goals of Review Guesser, was to get developers to be more honest about the quality of the thing they're doing. Because when they make a shoddy thing and they go and look at other people's shoddy things, they can tell reasonably well that thing is not quality, but they have like a false sense of value of the thing that they've made because they spent time on it, and they're not actually thinking about these things that other people care about. I'm actually seeing way fewer like first-person action boomer shooter, like interesting versions of like moving a character around in first person than I would like to see. And I've only done like 5 days worth out of the month so far. But, I love games like Blood Thief. I really like first person games that do different things with movement, like movement shooters and stuff. I'm not seeing as many of them as I would expect. And I would like to see more of those because some of my favorite games in the past 2 years have been in that category. I think part of the reason is that the people that aspire to make first person shooters often are like Unreal Engine realism people. And I think the people that are making the interesting experimental movement shooters tend to be more on the hobbyist side where they're making something on itch and they maybe never even get it to Steam, even though their game is way more interesting than half of the stuff on Steam, right? I think that's maybe what's going on a little bit there. There's a lot of games with like what I would call a casual mobile aesthetic that I don't think will do well because they just don't feel like they're for adults buying games on Steam. I'm going to subdivide horror into like pure on-rails horror games and horror games that have action or puzzles in them because I think those are very different. And I think I think that they sort of have different success criteria. In terms of anything we've noticed so far, I mean, it's hard to say because, like I said, everything I'm recording so far is just my own subjective response to the thing. I do tend to find... So there are some... I do tend to find... So the ones that score lowest... It's quite rare to get a game that scores very lowly in one category and not in others. So I've got this disparity score which keeps track of that. So ones that have the highest disparity score will show you where a game is, where I've scored a game like low in one area and high in another, right? It tends to be that if a game kind of looks really, really janky, there's other problems as well. So the marketing and branding is like, is the name of the game good is one of the things there. Like, does it have a boring or cringe name? Does the description read well and actually tell me what's in the game and make me interested in the game, right? For clarity of game design, this is like, can I actually tell what I'm doing as a player in this game from the Steam page? Does the description and the trailer and the screenshots make it possible for me to like play the game in my head and understand what's going on? And then the art and creative isn't necessarily like how polished the art is, but how consistent it is. So one of the things that you'll notice, which I'm not going to spend ages going into when I do the video for this, but maybe I'll do like a separate thing for Patreon. I made a category called AI Forward. Now, this doesn't have every AI game in it. Some of the games are like, you know, anime, but it's clearly made with AI. But I put them in anime anyway because that's who it's going to appeal to. But there are some of these games where it's like just so clearly AI that the only people who would like it are people that are like actually into that aesthetic. I tended to find a lot of these were really inconsistent in the art and creative side because someone would have like a really polished AI generated image for one thing, and then the rest of the game just looks like web development, like UI stuff. So, you know, that's kind of quite an obvious thing that is happening that I'm not surprised by. But yeah, I think there's this whole category of like games where people are using AI for everything, and there's only a small amount of them where it's been done kind of tastefully. And I mean, one thing I noticed as well is that I think there are like regional kind of aesthetic things going on where I look at a game as like a Western indie game consumer, and I think that art style doesn't go with that game. And then I look at where the studio is, and it's like a studio from Asia or some other part of the world. And I think maybe those studios don't care because they'll have their own audience in their own region anyway. But there's quite a lot of games where it looks quite polished, but the aesthetic and the game don't seem to go together. So let me find... I'll show you one example. Where is it? This is an example of what I'm talking about. So yeah, we're gonna go back like 6 weeks after or whatever, and I'll record how many sales each game has had, and then weight it for like how many days it's been, and then see where I was more or worse, better or worse at like in terms of like how my gut feel matched onto the thing. Because I'm generally not interested in doing like big scale quantitative stuff, but I thought this would be an interesting exercise because, like kind of like I said earlier, there are so many people trying to do game design as a quantitative data driven thing because they come from like rationalist computer science backgrounds. I tend to be more of the opinion that it's much more vibes, and you do things in an evidence driven way, but your evidence comes from, you know, having taste, which is still based on data in the world, right? It's just not the kind of data that's easy to quantify. So I'm trying to quantify my own taste reactions to things and my own gut feelings about, you know, whether the people who like that type of game will like that specific game. And then we're going to see how well it does in comparison. So this is an example of, you know, we've got like an untranslated Korean developer name over here. This is an example of what I'm talking about, where you've got like developers from other markets where it feels like they don't really understand the things they're putting together. So we've got an incremental game that's also like a casual cozy game, and it's like, okay, both of those things are popular, but is that really a strong audience overlap for like, you know, node buster skill trees and then this very cute kind of femme coded Kiki's delivery service kind of aesthetic? I feel like there is someone who would really like that combination of things, but it feels like a misjudgment of how the aesthetic and the game genre goes together. So that's the kind of stuff I'm sort of interested in, and those are the things I've been noticing. You get lots of mismatches. I think a lot of the ones where I feel like some of the ones where I've marked the art as being quote unquote bad, it's not because it actually looks bad, it's because it doesn't feel like it suits the game. So yeah, those are the sorts of things I'm looking at. Connor, I mean, I muted a couple of words on the stream to do with AI because people kept asking questions about it. So if you're posting about that, that might be disappearing it. But yeah. So in terms of genres I'd like to see more of, I don't know. It's hard to say. I think there are a lot of genres where I have like a kind of so what question. Like with, like, for example, with platformers, it's like, okay, I'm jumping around. So what? Like, what is the mechanic? Am I doing combat? Is there an interesting puzzle? Blah, blah, blah. There are lots of genres I get sent lots of that particular type of game, but I always have that kind of so what question. I have it a lot with horror games. Like lots of people just kind of try and do the Five Nights at Freddy's kind of ghost train horror. Stuff is happening to you and you have no control over it. That to me is not super interesting. It's just I'm not the audience for it, and I can't pretend to be. I think one of the things I expect to see though is that the art matters more than people think, and that doesn't mean if you can't make good art you can't make a game, but it does mean that you probably shouldn't try to make types of game art which you can't do yet, or if you're going to, you need to deliberately try to skill up in it. And I think one of the things people forget about your stories like your Toby Foxes and your Eric Barone making Stardew Valley, Eric Barone learnt pixel art to make Stardew Valley as he was making Stardew Valley. You know, he didn't just make Stardew Valley with his starting skill in pixel art and never train that skill. He sort of looked at references, he did the art, he redid the art, he redid the art again. He was training the skill as he did it. And you can, you know, be ambitious with what you make as long as you actually commit to trying to train that skill up to a particular level of quality. And I think a lot of people just don't really take on that responsibility, and they just go, oh, you know, I'll just do what I'm capable of doing, and if it's not interesting or appealing, then that's fine. And you know, if that's how you feel about it, that's fine as well. But also don't be too bothered if people don't like it, because people look at games when they play them, you know. So right, let's check out banners again. I will be checking the chat for more questions and stuff in a minute, but I'll put my awful spreadsheet away because I've spent so many hours looking at it already. I think the vast majority of the very AI forward generative games will not do anything at all. And it's not because they don't necessarily look good, it's because they don't seem to show much of a regard for making the player enjoy themselves. They're either like so simple as a game that you kind of look at it and you're like, what's the game here? Or a lot of the time they're like very overly complicated simulators with loads and loads of menus and stuff. I've seen quite a few of those coming out of that space, and I think I think a lot of the time they're doing something that another game does much better and with better UX and stuff like that. So I think the feedback I had on this last time was like, I think the core of the game was quite interesting. We're going to do a new campaign. I felt like this was a little bit overloaded with information in some parts. And I think when you're making a game that's like the micro version of something else or the casual version of something else, you need to be wary of like how much information you're putting on the screen. And I think this had some problems with that last time I saw it. But I like the overall vibe of this. I don't think low poly PSX is overdone. I don't think that's how people really engage with stuff. One thing I would really be conscious of is when people say X is overdone or there's too much of X, they're nearly always people that didn't like that thing in the first place, right? So be very, very careful. If there's something you're interested in making, whether it's a particular art style or a particular type of game, and you hear people say, oh, I'm tired of these, oh, there's too many of these, check if that person ever actually liked that thing. Because if they didn't, then that's a false signal, because they're just telling you that they never liked that thing, right? It's like with music, right? So many people, you know the song Hurt? The 9 Inch Nails song that Johnny Cash covered? So many people like to say, oh, I prefer the Johnny Cash version. He really made it his own. And then when you quiz them, you find out that they just didn't like Nine Inch Nails anyway. And it's like, okay, well, what you've actually told me is you like country music more than you like industrial hard rock music. And you don't like Nine Inch Nails. You're not actually saying that the song version is better. You're just saying you prefer it when the sweet old country man sings it, right? So be careful when people like talk down on something and say that there's too much of it or this other thing is better or whatever, because they probably just didn't like it in the first place. And in which case, you know, you shouldn't take advice off of people who don't like the PSX aesthetic about whether you should do the PSX aesthetic or whether you should do a particular genre of game. Pay attention to the people who actually like the thing that you want to make, and not the people who are pretending to be like lapsed fans when they were never fans. You are Captain Morgan Bernhard, leader of the Judgebringers, a company that carries no lord's banner but its own. Lieutenant Shepka commands the swords and Corporal Fletcher commands the bows. Choose your contracts carefully, the realm will not hold together much longer. Bandits have taken the crossroads south of Skill Reason, and every cart that passes has to pay them. The village elder scraped together a small purse. Not much enough to clear some rogue men at arms off the crossroads. I feel like this is it's a little bit of a... It feels like a little bit of a mismatch to have this much establishing story and be doing this like flat kind of very sleek visual design. It's like we're going for the same kind of minimalism as Bad North, but with way more text. Captain, follow these instructions at the bottom carefully. They will help you master the battlefield and weather the storm that is brewing. Could that be one sentence? Probably. Continue. Tap your captain's Judgebringer cavalry regiment on the right to select it. Now tap Shepka's infantry regiment on the left, highlighted in yellow. That's the swap tile. Tap once to set it up, then once more to confirm. Has any low poly PSX style game ever made it near mainstream? I don't know, it depends what you put into that category. What's the Crow, the PSX horror game, Crow something? Sorry We're Closed, I think is doing alright. I think those both have PlayStation versions, which is a good indicator that something did alright on one platform already. Select a unit to move, attack, or use tactics artifacts. How combat works. No randomness. Okay, there's lots of stuff competing for our attention here.
Captain.
Every unit's banner tells you what it can still do this turn. The white border means the unit can still move this turn. Semi-transparency means it's already attacked. Okay. I think if this is intuitive enough, you might not need to tell people it directly and they can just learn it over time.
Yes. Captain.
Okay, so they can only move one square.
Captain. Captain.
Red tiles show the enemy in striking range. Tap them to target. You can first click a blue tile to determine what to move, and directly afterwards click a red tile to move and attack in one go. Or you can first move and... This is too... I feel like we've been over this quite a lot. This is too much information about what could happen. Just tell me what to do and let me do it, and I will learn the possibilities around those actions by carrying them out. As soon as you're asking the player to read this text and project into the future in their mind about all of the things that could happen, you've lost them. That's not how we do onboarding. Right? It's just, it doesn't work. The only games where you can get away with this level of pre-explaining rules are things like digital board games, 4Xs, where the players are so kind of used to very, very heavy mechanical slow games where they will sit there and open up all these information tabs and read the thing. Any other game, when you're tutorializing it, just tell people what to do, let them do it, explain things as they happen. Don't ask us to project into the future and say, if you do this, then this, and if you do this, then this. It's too many steps. It's not chunking the information enough. It's not giving us it's giving us too much information per how often we get to learn something by doing it, right?
Captain. Captain.
So I'm supposed to be attacking the guys in the red tile. Okay, so we click once to set where we're moving, and then we click attack. And they don't move before they make the attack. They do it all in one go.
Yes.
The crossroads are clear. Lieutenant Shepka picked up a new shield and the company has a little silver. Nobody in the village will remember your name, but the work is done. Okay. Yeah, more variety to the unit barks is going to be important if you're going to have them. I mean, games that have barks often have a slider to be able to turn down the frequency as well. The ridge. Terrain changes everything. Use hills, forests, and flanking. Begin control. Heal your troops. Wounded regiments fight at reduced unit count. This affects endurance and power. Tap the heal button on each damaged unit to restore soldiers before the next contract. Okay. We want to heal the captain. Oh, we can heal both of them. And we're going to put the Iron Ward. We can't see what that does. 1 HP per soldier this round. Okay. We can't see what that does before we assign it. I know okay, so we can at least kind of trial and error it. Yeah, we're going to put that on swords. I think the general kind of everything to do with the main interactions of the game outside of the tutorial are pretty good, but I'm not sure why we're getting this much story in a game like this. Like, each of these screens could be one sentence. Bloody hell, Merc's messing with my business. Knew that banner, swords out, you bastards. And if any of you runs, I'll cut you myself. Okay. Hills give ranged units 1 range. Position matters, use the terrain. Click any terrain to see its traits displayed. Okay, so these are hills. You can see they're raised up a little bit. They're visually higher and they're a lighter color. So we've got a couple of ways of telling that they're hills, which is good.
Yes, Captain.
Captain.
We're going to put the swordsman in the forest. Bring the cavalry round there to protect the archers, and turn. Yeah, the main problem I'm having so far is that your tutorial has just got too much projection into the future. Forests give 1 HP per soldier in combat. Good defensive cover, but entering costs 2 movement. Ruins, grey tiles give +2. Okay, you're telling me about forests and ruins at the same time? Is there a better way of doing that? Is that a ruin? Is that a ruin? Yeah, that's a ruin. Okay. So, if we think about that tutorial step, you just gave us information that exists in this tooltip at the bottom. So, ruins give you HP +2, forest gives you HP +1, they take cost to move to go into. The information that you want us to use is already in the main game. So if that tutorial step needed to exist at all, it should have been saying, hover over the ruins and see what it does. Hover over the forest and see what it does. Or something like teaching us to use the kind of helper mechanics that are already there rather than...
Yes, Captain.
Okay, we're going to shoot the furthest away spears. The spears are going to be strong against the horses, I imagine. So let's bring the men at arms in here to block them from getting to the horses. And then we'll try and... I missed that. Use your Judge Bringer to do what? Oh.
Yes.
Cool. I feel like this is an interesting project because you've got a lot of stuff you can kind of play around with. I'm not saying I hate the writing per se. I'm saying it just feels like there's a bit much of it. And
Yes.
I think you want to validate the gameplay before you put that layer of the game in, maybe. I don't know.
Yes, Captain.
Captain. Captain.
Yeah.
Flee!
Okay, they're fleeing. Yeah, so that's the thing for me. It's like, I understand there are story-driven games that have a minimalist aesthetic, like Reigns, for example, but in Reigns it's all you're doing. Whereas when you start to put like a minimalist aesthetic into like a tactics game, it's like, well, you're showing that this is minimalist, but then the story is being told in a maximalist way, which I'm not necessarily going to be attracted to if I've come to play a little micro tactics game. So it's like, sort of... You know, Bad North is a minimalist tactics game, and it doesn't have any writing. And the thing is, the kind of aesthetic primes you for it to be a wordless game. And this aesthetic is like, it's making me think it's going to not have all of this fantasy about the world. And I think what someone just said in the chat is valid as well. Like, if you lent in the character images, right? If we did have a style for doing character portraits or something, so that when someone's talking, we're a little bit more zoomed in and we see what that guy's like close up, and we find a style that, you know, fits and is suitably kind of minimalist and cartoony and fits this world, it might make the writing feel more like it fits. But I think all the individual parts of this game are pretty great. I just, some things don't feel like they fit with the art style that the game is presenting, I guess. Each unit has a vision stat. Skirmishers and raiders can see far. Heavy infantry less so. The army with higher combined vision moves first at the beginning of the battle. Afterwards it's taking turns. Watch the eye icon totals on the deploy reveal screen. Okay. So we choose who we go, where we go. Put the captain there. Not in the marsh. Put him in the trees to start off with. Yeah, I think I would feel differently about the writing after you've got the character portraits in, because it just feels like the writing adds like a level of you should care about these characters to it, I guess. It's sort of humanizing them. But this visual aesthetic is usually for doing the opposite of that. This aesthetic is for making the characters on the screen just feel like toy soldiers, right? So we're not necessarily caring about who they are or like their character or anything like that. And I think having portraits might help rehumanize them a little bit if that's what you care about. Marsh tiles encumber units that enter them. An encumbered regiment can only fight or move. Moving in a marsh prevents attack or retaliation until next turn. Drag the enemy in, then strike. Okay. Drag the enemy... What? Drag the enemy into a marsh. Can I do that? Okay. You've just told me to drag the enemy into a marsh, but I have no idea how I would achieve that. All those guys look scary.
Yes, Captain.
Just start shooting their commander straight away.
Captain.
Your troops can use tactics, tap a unit, then use the trumpet buttons above their info box. Tactics have a cooldown and can be revised afterwards. Combat is usually deterministic. Each soldier of a regiment has hit points and deals damage. I think you're explaining too much of the system that people don't need to... They don't need to be told that. Because it says 2 damage. It doesn't have a range. It doesn't say 2 to 4 damage. It doesn't say any percentages. Just let people infer some stuff from how it's presented in the rest of the UI.
Yes, Captain.
I think that's the main thing you're struggling with on this project is you're sort of over-explaining things that are not relevant at that point in the game, or they maybe are relevant for people to know in the long run, but they don't need to be told at that particular stage, you know?
Yes. Captain.
Yes, Captain.
Trying to whittle down both groups so that they're both weaker. The pitchfork uses the rise up tactic. An axeman regiment rises from a forest tile their opponent hasn't walked through yet. Interesting. That's a cool ability. Okay.
Yes, Captain.
Captain. Yes.
We're going to go up there. And yeah, use our Judge Bringer to boost our damage and then go and attack those guys. Uh-oh. The king is dead. Aldrich III was found cold in his chamber with a wine cup still in his hands. Some say poison, others say fate. The lords are already rising from the throne, the peasants are rising in the fields, the quieter powers wait in the marsh and the ash. The kingdom is being torn apart. Word of the company's victories have spread through the lowland farms. By morning, a handful of village lads and light-footed scouts have drifted into a camp, looking for a mark, a meal, and a banner to follow. Militia and skirmishers are yours to recruit now. Okay, cool. We get more... Huh. Where's the resource I'm spending for that? So... Oh, okay. This is gold. I would make sure that that stays yellow on there because that was a little bit confusing for a moment. Make sure that this stays yellow. You can have the number in green and everything else in green, but changing the color of the icon's a little bit confusing. Okay, we've got some militia. I like that these get little names. It's nice. We'll heal the Judge Bringer. We'll heal our big units. They've got a wage. One. Okay, so these are our main units. And then we can hire these guys, and then every time we bring them in, we have to pay an extra gold to pay them in. One thing that I struggle a little bit with, because this is web, is we lose the context of how much gold we have. So whenever we're going to spend the gold, we're like down here, or we're thinking about gold, we're down here. We're on here, and then the gold is like up here. So if this could be the resources need to be locked onto this bar, I think. And there might be other things as well, but scrolling around and like losing the context is okay. You need to be able to see the resource as you spend it, right? No fight, no blood, and the client is satisfied. This is the kind of contract that keeps the quartermaster smiling. The paymaster counts out 11 gold into the banner bearer's hand. Every defeat leaves a debt. I think the problem I'm having with the narrative stuff as well is that I'm not like a military history guy. I'm not into any of that kind of stuff. And it feels like it's just kind of repeating the same thing a bunch of times. Just like, we're doing a battle and here's why we're doing... Oh, they're over there and over there. And we're going to be in the middle. It's going to be interesting. It's kind of... got to deploy in a big old line. This is going to be awful. Oh well. Again, Merc, again, every time me boys bled for... No running today, I'll have your stinking guts in me fist by sundown you're at. Okay, that's what I was thinking too. Again, could that be one line? Probably could be one line. You know, it's like a... It's just a combat taunt. These are skirmishers. Okay, they have 2 range.
Yes, Captain.
They are piratey people. They have a parrot icon.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to go over to the
Yes.
ruins where we get extra defense
Yes.
or extra health.
Captain.
I really like playing the actual tactical game of this. I think the narrative stuff doesn't feel strong enough to justify being in the game yet.
Yes.
Really. It's just a little bit too much like it wants me to care about these characters as people, but also it's like they are little toy soldiers and the aesthetic suggests I'm not supposed to care about them. I do occasionally feel like I'm not saying you should absolutely do this, but one thing I've noticed is this panel is constantly actually on the map in a place we might see, whereas the map has never been so wide that we need all this negative space around the side, right? So we've put a UI panel here, even though it nearly always occludes something we should be able to see, and if we put it down the side, it wouldn't be occluding anything. And I find it a little bit intrusive. And I also feel like...
Yes.
I feel like there's a lot of stuff here that I just don't really need to see every time I look at the unit as well. Okay, so...
Yes, Captain.
What can we do from here? They're over there.
Yes, Captain.
Captain. Captain.
Yes,
Captain.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
To remember to use their little abilities.
Yes, Captain.
There we go.
Yes, Captain.
I mean, a classic one that they would do in a lot of games is... I mean, so we're looking for the banner to be this state to know that we don't have anything else we can do, I guess. That's right. Captain. Captain.
Yes, Captain.
Captain. Yes.
I can't give out the games to try spreadsheet, no, because it's got contact details and stuff on.
Yes, Captain.
Captain. Yes. Yes.
Yes, Captain.
Captain.
Remember to use their abilities. Yeah, I just think everything is not necessarily arranged in the place I would put it in this type of game. Let's take some screenshots, because the main thing I would say here is I really like this. I like playing it. I think it's got some confusing creative decisions in it that are gonna like make it hard to find an audience, because people who are attracted to a minimalist aesthetic probably want the game to be minimalist in other ways. And it's fine if you've got feedback that people like the writing, that's great. You know, that doesn't mean throw all of the writing out, but I'm very frequently seeing 2 lines of text where one would be better. If you think of games where the players are there to practice a particular type of skill, right? So think of Street Fighter, when a character pops up in Street Fighter and does a little taunt. They're not saying a full paragraph, they're not saying 2 sentences, they say 1 sentence, right? It's that kind of level of writing. It's the same with the characters in Darkest Dungeon with their little barks. They're like 1 line of writing at a time, that kind of thing.
Yes, Captain.
I'm just going to do some chop shop stuff, because I think there's some working through this that we could do quickly now. So I think there's a bunch of stuff here. And like I said, when it shows up at the bottom, it kind of covers the map in most of the levels I've seen so far, and that feels a bit wrong. So let's just move some stuff around and experiment. So we're gonna quickly, because I think this is a more helpful use of the time than just playing the game some more. So let me just flip that upside down. Right, so that's our map. And then I'm gonna partly just be working off of where would this go in any other game, because I feel like you're doing some very web dev things of like trying to put things in a place where it works for your system, or designing things from first principles rather than where it would normally go in a video game. And I think as soon as you're making a tactical combat game, you're very much in the territory of hardcore video games, and that means it really just needs to go where it would normally go in a video game, right? So I can actually, right, rather than trying to let's Did I understand that I could press space? I mean, not really. I didn't. I think the other thing is you need to kind of, if you want a player to like care about not missing their turns and not missing their actions and stuff, that's something that will come later. But I think the standard in a lot of these sorts of games, if you're sort of, I mean, usually like when I play 4X, like turn-based 4X games, they sort of warn you if you've got stuff that you haven't moved, you know? They have like a whole step on end turn. Right, so this is game settings. There is no way this needs to be in the middle of the screen down here. Because remember the car metaphor in UI design, right? The HUD is stuff that's further away from you. It's passive information, and it's things that you don't need to access all the time. The stuff that's close to you, right? The bottom of the screen, we read the bottom of the screen as being closer to us. So the active things are at the bottom of the screen. These are active things, but they're not things that the player is going to click on most of the time. So they should be up here somewhere. Right? So that already gets rid of some of this UI. The reason I put end turn at the bottom right is because we generally, in left to right languages, read screens left to right, and that means that something that is presented as being on the right screen means go forward. And that's why end turn is always on the bottom right or the middle right sometimes. I think Hearthstone has it up here. Say the Spire has it down here, Hearthstone has it up here, but it's not going to usually be over here. Because by positioning it very, very far over the right, it's kind of creating the visual language that says, this is to progress, this is to go right, and it's like a big going right because it's over on the right, not in the center right? And then let's have a look at what else we've got here. So we've got abilities the character can do. We've got the information about the tile that they're on. And I feel like you've bunched a lot of stuff together here that is just maybe not, it doesn't need to go together in the way that you've currently got it. So we move these up here, we move end turn to where it would usually be in most games, and that just leaves us with this stuff. Now this stuff is to do with the actual characters that we've clicked, and this is to do with the terrain they're on. And those things could go together, but what if we want to? We're going to occasionally want to find out about a piece of terrain without a character being on it, right? So my understanding is, yeah, if we go on other stuff, then the terrain changes down here as well.
Yes.
So this is actually related to where our mouse is rather than that unit. So I'd think a little bit about that as well.
Yes, Captain.
But I think one of the problems is you're doing good stuff in terms of like trying to make these banners do stuff, like make the banner be a UI element and like indicate what stage we're at and all of that. That's really good. That's something you should be doing. But there's no point doing that when you've got like a much larger glaring problem like this weird centered interface that jumbles up things that are not necessarily related to each other and puts it all in a place that obstructs the battlefield, right?
Yes, Captain.
Captain. Captain.
Like I generally find the combat quite good to do. And some of the stuff you've said of like, oh, do you understand that this? Do you understand that that? It's like, well, I would if I played the game longer. So I'm not too worried about that. The main things I'm worried about is like the UI being laid out in a unintuitive way that maybe gets in the way of the aesthetic of the game as well. Because there's something about having this gradient and it centered that makes me feel too much like I'm looking at a website as well. Kill my guys. Get some militia. Grade regiments are out of reach. Your wage purse reserves quite... Oh, so these are people that I can't hire again. And then I can choose a mission and I can recruit... raiders. And the thing is, I don't mind it looking website and web-based, but I just think the audience for that and the story stuff is... I feel like if you're going to have any story at all, maybe humanizing them a little bit by having commander portraits and then reducing the actual amount of text they say so that when someone taunts you at the start of combat, it's one sentence. When you get a bit of story between levels, it's like a paragraph of 3 sentences, absolute maximum, and setting very strict rules about that. Because even in like a big studio that has professional writers and stuff, they will have rules about how much text should be spent on certain things, how much story should be used in certain places. And this kind of, you know, this isn't Suikoden, or this isn't what's the other one? What's the weeby visual novel with the tactical combat in? Fire Emblem. This isn't Suikoden or Fire Emblem, We don't have personal relationships with these characters. So they're all just a medieval dude cussing you, like an orc in Shadow of Mordor. I smelled your column from the river, mercenary. Sweat, piss, fear in that order. You were on my road now. Okay, that's a good one. That felt like it justified how long it was. I think you just need to be very, very sparse with how much story you're giving people because the aesthetic is not leaning towards that. And part of that is because the aesthetic is giving us toy soldiers and dehumanizing them. And when I say dehumanize, I know that's a term people would use in a judgmental way. Like dehumanizing people is evil. What I mean is in a character design way, when we make certain aesthetic choices, it primes us to think about the character more or less as a character, more or less as a toy. And that's why you get the classic thing in like 90s kids shows, like the Putty Patrol in Power Rangers or the Foot Soldiers in Ninja Turtles, where they're just, you know, completely, what's the word?
Captain.
They're completely fungible. they're not like they're disposable. They are you can exchange them, and you're not gonna like.
Yes, Captain.
Know that it's a different actor or whatever.
Yes. Yes.
And it's got that same quality here, and that's why it feels strange that we're giving them so much dialogue to say and.
Lord. Lord.
Captain.
Huntmaster Fenziers. One of the things that this already has working for it that I think is a very strong point that I think is going to come across well to people that like this sort of game is just how quickly you see quite a big variety of unit types. You know, we've got these horseback archers now. We've got them having dogs, probably summoning dogs as well, I would expect at some point. Look at this guy on his own. Oh, Captain Fletcher.
Yes.
Yeah, I have that problem with Sunless Sea. I kind of preferred playing Fallen London on its own.
Captain.
And then we move into the forest. But these guys haven't attacked.
Yes. Yes.
But yeah, again, we've got another level where we've got this space around here for the water where this UI could go, and then the UI is always getting in a little bit of the way of the actual game context.
Lord.
Captain.
Lord. Lord.
Where's the one that allows us to... Is that the one? Yeah, that allows us to attack diagonally. I love the moveset. I really like the kind of different abilities we've got to make our...
Yes.
We've got these like once a battle abilities that allow us to... you know, increase our attack or allow us to attack diagonally when we can't normally. Now they're going to flee. Although also there's lots of the enemy getting to run away when I want to kill them as well. I do kind of, I mean, I kind of like the idea of using the emojis as if they are heraldic symbols. We're going to go over there. We're going to kill him. Don't let him get away.
Captain. 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 Yes.
Hell yeah. I don't have to fight the rest of the stuff because I killed the leader. That was satisfying because we've had quite a few where the where they've managed to flee. And I wanted to have a satisfying ending and stomp everyone on the board. The Greenwood Compact lost Huntmaster Fen here, but they did not lose Corporal Fletcher's bows. The prisoners were already on the road east when the leader fell. A holding camp, a watchtower, and a week's head start. That is what we have to break through to bring them home. See, when I comment on the writing, I'm not saying it's bad. It's fine. It feels like it's in the right style for like a diary in a medieval setting. It's just whether or not it's did I get anything from reading that? That's the thing for me. It's like, okay, I get the flavor, but if I'm supposed to read one of those after every combat, what am I actually supposed to get from it? Because I don't feel it's like describing what just happened. I'm not getting any more information about the world. I think when someone says something funny, like a taunt that's a good insult, that's good, or just something witty, right? Huntmaster Fen falls before the banner can be struck. The Greenwood Compact will fill this absence for many seasons. Okay, so that's emphasizing the impact that I had. Your warband strips the field, 7 coins jingle in your purse, no contract pay, but the dead were carried. Oh yeah, because I wasn't supposed to kill them. Mad Linden's Lancers step out of the column and swear oaths to ride with you. A regiment of raiders. 2-star, raw but eager. That's cool, yeah. I think it could be really challenging mixing mechanical information and story information, and that's why we often do stuff like this, like stylizing flavor text into italics, right? I think you need to be really careful about like what you're using your text styles for. This is why, you know, Magic the Gathering cards have italics for the flavor text, and then they don't. And then they present the rules and the flavor text in a different style, because otherwise you can kind of get confused about what you actually need to read to play the game. Yeah, Cheese, I think that's part of it for me. It's like, it's such a sort of generic fantasy setting that I don't feel like pulled into it. And that's not because the writing isn't good. It's because I don't really understand what I'm supposed to get from engaging with the writing. Whereas if I play Fire Emblem or Suikoden, it's like, okay, I'm learning about these characters who are like my personal friends in this game, and I'm learning about the broader world, which is a strange, unusual fantasy world. And that's not to say like any of this is not interesting or can't be interesting, but I think it's there as toy soldiers to smash together, you know? And at the moment, it's kind of taking on this arch, kind of historical military fiction kind of vibe. And that is leading to like lots of pages of story, which are just battle reports, which, I don't know, I feel like they may be exciting to a particular type of Warhammer guy. But I think that type of Warhammer guy might want to play a game that doesn't look so sort of minimalist and kind of cute, really. It's kind of cute. Okay, so I get how the vision thing works now. That was presented to us in a tutorial. I think the vision mechanic could just be re-explained when you see that screen, rather than presenting it in a tutorial when we maybe don't care about it yet. They got some ruins. They're hanging out in the ruins. I should have deployed on this side and gone through the woods, really. I've got no rangers. This is ridiculous. I've done a totally terrible loadout here. Oh well, let's just...
Your orders?
Captain. Yes. Yes.
Lord,
Your orders?
I think we're going to die on this one.
Captain.
Your orders? Your orders? Your
We're going to
orders?
inspire, we're going to attack. These guys need to heal if they can. Going to use the Judge Bringer and then use that to deal extra damage over there. That didn't help very much, but hopefully, but at least we've lasted one more round.
Yes.
Your orders?
I don't know if horses get any sort of advantage up on hill. It doesn't feel like they should do, but they maybe they do.
Lord, Lord,
Captain.
Captain.
Yes.
Your orders?
Captain.
Lord,
We get our range boost there so I can attack diagonally with those guys.
Captain.
Really like the core tactics game of this.
Flee!
I also think the kind of flat, mobile-y style looks better when we're occasionally getting this text style in. I would even maybe put the end turn button in this kind of Saxon-looking carved typeface, just so that you've always got a little bit of that on the screen.
Flee, you fools!
Because that kind of chunky carved stone typeface that you're using for the story bits, I think if you used it for these bigger buttons like advance and end turn, it would start to make the game look more coherent as well. What's this font called? Do you have this font? So I feel like having the end turn. I'm going to put the wrong font because I don't know what that one is. But having the end turn in like that kind of thing, it's going to feel more... Because when you're in the combat, you can't see any of that, and it just makes it feel very much like you're playing this kind of... sort of slightly themeless abstract web game. Okay, so... I kind of feel like it would make a lot of sense if we did something a little bit more like this. I almost feel like this should be in a panel like this. Part of the reason for that is this set of information is a little bit daunting when you look at it, and you don't usually really need all of it. And it's helpful to have, but I think there's something about the way that it's all laid out next to each other that makes it feel a little bit daunting. So remember Gestalt stuff. So anytime we make something in line with something else, or we put it close together, we are creating a sort of psychological association between those things. So I've deliberately not put this directly in line with the end turn button because it's not actually related to it, right? These are related to each other because they're the character stats, so we should still keep them together, but I think maybe putting them under each other will make it feel less like a big run-on sentence of alternating between emojis and text, which makes it feel a little bit overwhelming to look at currently. That's partly because it's in the middle, and it's sort of like presenting itself as really important because it's in the middle at the bottom, and it's like covering over parts of the game, but most of the time we don't need it. So maybe if we put it over here, Because remember, active at the bottom, close to the player, like their steering wheel in their car, right? And then the context and the passive information the player is responding to up at the top, like the windscreen of the car. That's kind of what we're going for. So I would put the actual abilities you can do down here. It's okay for them to occlude the play space, because they're actually really important turn to turn for you to like be conscious of having. And then maybe this isn't exactly the way to do it, but I think you have an information panel on the side. Something like that. That kind of thing. But then you're splitting it again, right? But then it's like, well, maybe we need to split it because some of the stuff we don't need straight away. Or maybe we do something in the corner so it's more like, okay, here's your unit information. And it's still at the bottom of the screen, but it's not in the bottom center, which was the main problem because it was like eating up the actual bit of it was eating up our window into the game world, right? Which is the thing we need to look at and judge. And that's kind of irritating when you're playing it, but it's even worse if there's like a unit here and you can't see it because that big gradient is covering it. So maybe there's a version that's like this. So we've got, here's our passive stuff about the character and the guy that we've got selected, and then here's the abilities, because these are like more active things. So we go from like more active as we go further right, because these, you know, these are related to these are related together, but when you put them all in one big block, it sort of becomes a big mass and you can't tell the stuff apart. So let's just kind of look at a couple of examples first. So let's go and see how some big epic strategy games with tactical combat do this stuff. No, that's not what I wanted. I want the game okay, game UI database. There we go. That's what we want. Show me the gameplay HUD. Huh. So this isn't exactly what I suggested, but it is kind of similar. So they've associated things by putting them in a line, and then they've separated them conceptually based on what you do with them, right? So at the bottom left, we've got the information of the currently selected unit. And then at the bottom middle, we've got the stuff that that unit can do. This is actually the commander. So this is separate. This is nothing to do with these two. This is your like leader in the whole game. So they've done the same thing of what I suggested here. It's kind of together because it's kind of taking up the same row, but then it's clearly separated, and that separates the more passive information about the unit and then the thing that you can do. And it does it in a way that covers as little of the window into the diegetic world of the game as possible. So we kind of lucked out there because what I did here lines up very closely with what they've done there. Let's go back to UI database. So Bad North, when you're actually playing, incredibly minimalist game, and it has to be because it's real time. Same sort of thing. We've got it in the corner. It's not in the center. If it was in the center, it would be more likely to be getting in the way of stuff we need to look at. Character, stuff they can do. Anyone got any other suggestions for like top-down tactical indie games? Oh, Invisible Ink. That's one of my favorites. Old now. 10 years old now. Bottom left again. Just tending to avoid the centers at the bottom and the sides unless it can be something very thin. And you notice this as well. If you go like... This is across genres as well, right? We can put stuff up in the middle of the sides or at the bottom, but when we do, it tends to be thin. It tends to be like a bar. So your corners are where you can do chunky windows, but if you've got a chunky window with like multiple subsections and stuff, probably it's going to need to be in the corners. And then if you put something along the bottom or the side, it's usually a bar. So you've got like a quick bar in things like Baldur's Gate, where it's like 1 or 2 rows of icons that are basically the same thing, but not like a quick bar with a text thing above it with another thing. And that becomes even more important when you're trying to do like the minimalist version for mobile or web, or the version that works with a controller or whatever. Let's have a look at Battle Brothers. Let's just see what the pattern is. Because a lot of this just comes down to like looking at the other games and trying to work out why they've done things the way that they did them. Battle Brothers game. They've got it in the middle, but it's kind of spread out wide so that it doesn't stack on top of on top of itself. Whereas the one in Banners, we've got the abilities on top of the unit information, and then on top of that, we've got that little pulsing thing that tells us about the like currently selected terrain. But yeah, there's loads of stuff you can read around this on Gestalt design for UI and everything. I did those UI lectures on it. I tried to kind of extract the Cliff's Notes indie game version from that. But I feel like that is kind of one of the areas of that game that needs to work a little bit better. And the reason I say that is, let me just open the game one more time. The reason I say that is... Where is it? So this isn't too bad when we're deploying, but even then, I mean, we could do this vertical and it would not cut across the battlefield, you know, and there's something about the way that your level design works with the UI design, where this would probably be fine if your levels were like horizontally long and thin, but they're nearly always vertically long and thin, and that means that we need to make those two parts of the game work together. But one of the reasons why I am sort of so focused on this is when you see this big block of information and it's got all these emojis and stuff, it makes it feel like it's way more... I think there is depth in this game, but you're trying to... You know, you're trying to appeal to a sort of person that would like this aesthetic, which means that this person wants their game to be reasonably light and easy to understand. I mean, a lot of this information in Bad North is just not given to you. You only learn it by playing the game. Slightly different here because we're doing a turn-based game. But even just breaking this section up and spreading it around the screen a little bit takes away that effect of just... I look at this and I find this quite daunting. Even though I can look at all of these things individually and it's very intuitive that if a boot is movement and this is health, there's something about seeing all of this together in this particular configuration with this above it and everything. Makes it quite daunting, makes it easy to forget about the abilities as well when they're so important. And I think that's why stacking these on top of each other as well is probably a good idea, because it just reduces that effect of like, you're just seeing this big line of emoji number, emoji number, emoji number, and going, huh? Which I know that kind of sounds like I'm deliberately being a dumbass, but that is kind of people's brains, their kind of like gut instinct when they first look at something. It is dumbass mode, right? And you can make something look easier or more difficult to digest intellectually just by the order that you put the information and the way that you arrange it. And this is like chunked everything together, and it's kind of like looking at a knot of, you know, you get 3 cables out, nothing complicated. Put them in a big ball, suddenly you look at it and you go, oh, I don't want to deal with that. It feels a little bit like that cognitively. So just sort of, you know, separating the actives from the information, putting the information in a column so that it doesn't have that thing of just running together into a list of strings and symbols. I think those 3 things would get you a long way. And then as far as the story goes, like I said, I think the writing is good as writing. I think it makes me ask this question repeatedly of like, what is this for in the context of the game? And I couldn't always get a good sense of what I was supposed to be getting out of it. And like you said, sometimes it's actually telling you the mechanics of the game, but that can be confusing for people, especially when you're doing this kind of toy-like minimalist aesthetic, because that suggests to people that this is going to be more of a, you know, game that you're just playing for the fun of it. And maybe it's deep, maybe it's strategic, but it's not necessarily there to immerse you in a world. And the writing is pushing against that a little bit. And I think you can make those things work together, but I think you just need to be a bit more strict about when is the writing there to entertain us, like the characters taunting us. When is it there to just give information about what just happened? In which case, I think it's better to just go, you got 7. You failed the no kill rule, but you got 7 gold anyway, and not present that as story, because when you're presenting as a story, it makes it hard to differentiate like what I really need to pay attention to and what is kind of more fluff. So those for me are the big things in that game. So that's it for today. I am going to be scheduling next week, some point at the weekend, maybe on Monday. I will be prioritizing patrons games because there is a little bit of a backlog on them. So just keep an eye on the Discord. I will try and ping people as I schedule their games. And sorry to the devs of Road to Ruler, just couldn't get it to work today. I will play it again at some other point when that Steam build is working, but it just wouldn't work for me at the start of the stream. Yeah, have a good rest of your Thursday. I am gonna go and finish off doing the submission portal for folks who want to be part of the collab jam video. I know I didn't explain that very well on the Discord yesterday. Cheese, thanks for pointing that out. I was so tired. I was just like, throw some URLs on there. They'll work it out. I'll do that properly after this, after I put the timestamps into this VOD. And have a great weekend as well.